Well, disability advocates fear a tough federal budget next month could stymie moves to improve education for disabled children. Only about a third of disabled Australians between the ages of 15 and 64 complete Year 12. For students with physical and developmental difficulties, schools where they can thrive remain the exception, not the rule. This report from the Social Affairs correspondent, our Social Affairs correspondent, Norman Hamont.
It's a day like any other at Clifton Hill Primary School in Melbourne. And while the controlled chaos may look and sound familiar, this is no ordinary primary school. There are 22 students here with a disability, some with extra funding to attend school and some without. Most of the disabilities are not visible, such as children with intellectual disabilities or diagnosed behavioral issues.
Okay, you got those smiles, let's see them.
For more than 2 decades, Principal Jeff Warren has shaped Clifton Hill into a school where students with disabilities are not just tolerated, they are welcomed.
It's the message that we're giving to kids about inclusiveness, developing tolerance and kindness and acceptance, and in fact delighting in that diversity.
Over the years, that message seems to have gotten through to the kids in the classrooms. Many say they feel lucky to have had the chance to go to school and make friends with students with disabilities.
It's quite good to learn how they act and what happens if you did have a disability.
Because you'll meet more disabled people when you get older, and it's good to know what it's like.
But the reality is, this school in a well-to-do suburb with an engaged parent community is hardly typical. Michelle Corby's son Blake, who has cerebral palsy, attended Clifton Hill for 5 years. His experience here was overwhelmingly positive, but she says it was also a huge effort. She can see how it is that nearly 2/3 of Australians with a disability never complete Year 12.
You have to have a principal that's completely on top of it. You need all of the therapists. You need the school community to embrace you as well. So it's a whole process. It's not an easy thing to do.
The Commonwealth and the states provide funding for students with disabilities to go to school, but advocacy groups say more than half of those who need money aren't getting it. The problems go beyond just funding. For thousands of families, the challenge is finding a school where children with disabilities fit in. Here in the outer suburbs of Melbourne, Jason Gray has been out of school for almost a year. Jason, 15, has high-functioning autism, also known as Asperger's syndrome, which affects his learning and social abilities. He also suffers from oppositional defiant disorder. He is easily angered. By his own admission, finding a school that meets his needs is not easy.
I'm a special kid. I'm different. Not like other kids that I've known, because sometimes I'll snap and I won't stop for a while.
His mother now faces a difficult choice. Jason left his last school after a confrontation with a staff member, but the nearest special needs school says his IQ is too high to attend.
He just doesn't fit anywhere now. His IQ's too high. However, if he goes to mainstream, I don't believe it's going to work. Professionals have said it's not going to work. But it's like the education department isn't listening to us.
Jason may look and sound like a regular teenager, but he says he needs a school that understands students with his disability.
Give us time out so we can go outside and calm down. And when we're upset, let us go outside. Don't stop us from going outside, because if you do, you know someone's going to get hurt.
But even after finding a place at a well-regarded school, the challenges don't end for some students with a disability. Isabel Curtis is a student at Brighton Secondary College in Melbourne. She also has Asperger's syndrome.
I find it a bit more difficult to make friends and stuff in social life, and also I find a different way of learning.
Last year, she was denied a place on a school-sponsored trip to Africa on the basis that her Asperger's could pose a risk to other students. Her mother launched an online petition that gathered 25,000 signatures before the school relented.
It sort of validated how strongly I felt and how wrong the decision was. So it was incredibly reassuring.
The campaign to get Isabel a place on the Africa trip spurred a bitter debate on her sister Emily's Facebook page.
These comments are disgusting.
It frustrates me how people want to have their children accepted into society and think it is okay to pick and choose when to play their child's disability to their advantage. Even at Clifton Hill, Principal Jeff Warren recognizes those sentiments. But he says finding the resources to welcome students with disabilities is well worth it.
We've got to get back to the fundamental belief that all kids are able to learn and get that expectation and into schools and into our thinking.
The question for students with disabilities and their families is whether there will be the commitment and the money in the future to make schools like this one the rule and not the exception. Norman Hermont, Laidline.